Hey everyone, welcome to a study session with Kyla for AP Bio, where we break it down one chapter at a time. Because let's be real, sometimes the textbooks makes things way more complicated than they need to be. Today we're going to start with chapter 22, called Descent with Modification, a Darwinian View of Life. This chapter is basically a very vague explanation of the foundation of modern evolutionary biology. And let's just say, if you don't know Darwin, you're going to have a rough time with the rest of the unit. So let's start with the pre-Darwinian world. Before Darwin came along and changed bio forever, most people, especially in Europe, believed in special creation. This was the idea that species were individually designed by God and did not change. The dominant idea was Aristotle's scala naturae, or the great chain of being, where life was arranged in a fixed hierarchy with humans at the top. By the 18th century, though, scientists started questioning this, and one guy, Linnaeus, came up with binomial nomenclature, the whole Homo sapiens thing. He didn't believe in evolution, but he did classify organisms based on similarities, which became crucial for evolutionary biology. So the binomial nomenclature is the genus and species, the two names in Latin. Meanwhile, geologists like Hutton and Lyell were dropping some pretty wild ideas that the Earth was way older than people thought. Hutton proposed gradualism, the idea that geological changes happen slowly over time. Lyell built on this hypothesis with uniformitarianism, which basically says the same natural processes shaping the Earth today have been happening for millions of years. This was a huge deal because if the Earth was ancient, then evolution had the time it needed to happen. Before Darwin, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck had his own theory of evolution. He was right about species over time, but he totally flopped on the how. His theory was based on two principles. The first was use and disuse. If an organism used a trait a lot, it would get stronger, and if it didn't, it would shrink or disappear. The second part was inheritance of acquired characteristics. This meant that traits that an organism acquired during its lifetime could be passed on to the offspring, like a heritable trait. A classic but wrong example of this was a giraffe stretching its neck to reach high leaves and then passing on a longer neck to its babies. Nice try, Lamarck, but we now know how traits are passed through genes, not effort. Okay, now let's get to the good stuff. Charles Darwin and his theory of natural selection. In 1831, Darwin hopped on the HMS Beagle, a ship that took him on a 5-year journey around the world. His most famous stop was the Galapagos Islands, where he noticed that finches had different beak shapes depending on what they ate. This led him to a groundbreaking realization. Organisms produce more offspring than the environment can support, meaning there's a struggle for survival and lots of competition. Individuals with beneficial traits like a stronger beak survive and reproduce more. Over generations, these favorable traits become more common, leading to adaptation. This whole process is called natural selection, and it's the reason why species change over time. Darwin didn't just come up with this theory, though. He backed it up with a ton of evidence, which still holds up today. His evidence included direct observations where we can literally see the natural selection happening today. Like an example is antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Homology. Organisms have similar structures because they share a common ancestor. Example, the homologous structures in the forelimbs of humans, whales, and bats. We all have the same bones, but they have different functions, like us in our hands, bats in their wings, and whales in their fins. Then there's the fossil record. Fossils show transitional forms that link ancient species to modern ones. And last, we have biogeography, where species are distributed around the world in patterns that make sense if they evolved, like marsupials being mostly in Australia because of the continental drift after Pangea split. The phrase descent with modification, let's talk about it. Darwin never actually used the word evolution on the origin of species. Instead, he called it descent with modification, the idea that all species share a common ancestor but change over time due to natural selection. This was revolutionary because it shifted biology from God created everything exactly as it is to life changes over time due to natural forces. Darwin's theory wasn't just important for biology, though. It changed how we understand genetics, medicine, ecology, and even human behavior. It explains why we need different flu vaccines each year because viruses evolve, and why conservation efforts focus on genetic diversity. And that's the beauty of science. It's always evolving, just like life itself. And that's basically everything for Chapter 22. Hopefully this breakdown made Darwin's big idea a little easier to digest. If you liked this episode, make sure to subscribe and check out the next one where we'll dive into Chapter 23, because natural selection is only the beginning of the evolutionary story. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments or DM me at KylaAltschuler _ on Instagram. See you next time.